When I think of springtime in the kitchen, I think of light, bright, and fresh flavors. Today, I want to invite you along for some spring canning featuring some freshly picked redbud blossoms, as well as some stashed freezer finds. The first recipe that I have today is caramelized pineapple and habanero salsa. Now, this is one I have wanted to make for well over a year, but for some reason, the time didn't seem right until just now. My plan is to use this with some spring fish dishes that I have coming up, but I also think it would be really delicious with just some chips as a new kind of salsa to offer in addition to what we already make here at home. The first step in the process is to go ahead and roast off the pineapple. Now, I'm using a frozen pineapple, so the majority of the chopping was already done for me, which made this a whole lot easier. This recipe calls for 2 pounds of pineapple, so I did make sure to measure that out before getting started. Now, while that's roasting off in the oven topped with sugar, I did go ahead and chop up the onions needed, as well as some peppers that I had left over in the freezer. Now, I'm using poblanos instead of habaneros. The main reason for that, of course, is to tame down the heat just a little bit. This is something that my kids will eat, so switching out the pepper to something a little more palatable was definitely the choice that I needed to make in order to make sure that everyone here in the house would enjoy what I made in the end. Now, the liquid being added to this specific recipe is lime, which is the perfect complement to all the flavors that we're adding in here. You need a half cup of that lime juice to make about the 4 pints that we're going to end up with here in the end. When it comes to the pineapples, you do need to make sure to flip them over about halfway through in order to make sure that both sides get properly caramelized. Now, one thing I do recommend checking into if you are going to make this recipe is that while the recipe called for 2 pounds of pineapple, it also asks for you to chop the pineapple after it's roasted into 6.5 cups. Now, when I was looking at my sheet pan here, I knew that wasn't 6.5 cups. So I took my measuring cup and sure enough, we were at 4 cups, even though I followed the proper weight. So I did go ahead and add some more pineapple to make sure that I could come up to the 6.5 cup mark in order to create or to come up with the entirety of the recipe as listed. What I did not do was go ahead and go back and add more sugar. I wanted to make sure that I kept all of the ingredients in the same proportions as requested by the recipe in order to make sure it was safe for canning. Now, at the end, you also need to add in your chopped cilantro, which is what you just saw me add, as well as some salt. Everything else had cooked down for a little bit in the pan and got nice and soft, so I went ahead and put half of it into my food processor. Now, the goal here is not to puree it. You still want it nice and chunky, but you do want some variation in the size from what you pre-chopped earlier. So after a quick pulse a couple different times, I added it right back into the pan to make sure that everything was going to be appropriate for the final recipe. Now, if this recipe does look enticing to you, I do want to drop a note on where I found it just so you are aware where you can find it too. This comes from the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Preserving, and I personally love it in the spiral-bound format. I know it always costs a little bit more to get books in the spiral format, but specifically for canning, when you're going to go back so often to the same page, just to make sure you can turn the cover back or lay it wide open is always super helpful. So if you're looking for a book similar, I will make sure to link this one down in the description. Now, once it has some time to kind of cook down, you just want to go ahead and jar it up. Now, I am going to use my digital canner today. I know there's lots of conversation about them online. I have to tell you, I absolutely love this thing. It makes my life so much more convenient than worrying about what to do and if I can leave the kitchen or not when I'm getting my other canner set up. But this is a water bath recipe, so I personally have zero concerns about water bath or pressure for that matter, but specifically water bath canning in this thing because all you're wanting is for the jars to be covered and to boil. So this machine perfectly handles that task and makes my life a whole lot easier. Now, the headspace on these jars was supposed to be a 1/2 inch, so I did make sure to get it all pushed down in there. This is how you end up with enough juice for the recipe because it is rather thick and not super juicy. What I found was that when you push it down in there though, you have plenty of juice to go ahead and fill up the jar, and everything turned out really, really well. One thing I will say though is I was super cautious about debubbling to make sure I was getting everything poked around down in there, especially since it is so chunky. You want to make sure you take that extra caution just to make sure your headspace is appropriate and that you aren't trapping any extra air inside. Now, of course, I'm using my 4 jars lids. I know there are a lot of options out there on the market right now, but for me, these feel the thickest. I also haven't had any problems with sealing. I'm actually going to end up canning about 12 to 13 jars while we are on this specific video, and every single one of them sealed very successfully, no issues whatsoever. Now, as you can see here, I'm making a few adjustments in the size of the jar. This last jar just wasn't gonna fill up. Oftentimes when this happens, I will go ahead and just throw the jar in the fridge and not worry about canning it at all. But today I decided to go ahead and move it over into a 1/2 pint and a 1/4 pint so I could have different sizes available. I think sometimes with recipes like this, specifically if you are just gonna use it for something like fish, you don't need the whole pint at one time. So I felt like this would give me a good option and information moving forward, so I knew exactly how large I wanted to can them in next time. So as you can see, I set my digital canner for 20 minutes and had a little free time. So I'm going to take you outside as we get prepped for our next recipe, which happens to be Redbud jelly. While I'm not sure what part of the world you're watching from, right now here in Missouri, redbuds are everywhere. We actually have 5 on our property right here, super close to the house, and they are so gorgeous. For a couple years, I've been wanting to make redbud jelly, but we haven't had timing right. We've been really busy or something else has happened in order to get in the way, but not this year. So the first thing we did was went out and took all of the low-lying branches and gathered a 1/2 gallon full of blooms to take inside and to make a redbud tea with. I did find a couple tricks that I'll share with you. One thing that makes this easier is to make sure that you have a jar or whatever you're collecting in right under the branch so it's easy to get them straight in there and not fall off. Another tip is to grab straight up the branch like you see here and then just pull straight down. That will pull a whole bunch at one time and make them super easy to get into your hand instead of falling on the ground. Now, as you can see, the color of these redbuds is absolutely gorgeous. And of course, my little ladies could not wait to help me out. Now, while we're out here picking redbuds, I thought this would be a perfect time to give you an update on the garden that you saw us putting in last month. So far for the year, we have installed 8 of the Vago garden beds. These are 9.5 by 2.5, and they have been really, really fun to see kind of the whole plan come together. We also were able to go ahead and get all of our trellises installed. I have the one arch that you're seeing here. That's going to have peas and cucumbers on it as the season progresses. Cabbage is already in there at the bottom, as you can see. And we also were able to install irrigation. Now, this has been a dream of mine for a very long time. I am very blessed to have this set up. And I know everybody doesn't have something similar, so I wanted to show you something that I'm also trying out to make gardening easier for everyone, everywhere. I want to give a quick shout out to Vago Garden for sponsoring today's content and show you one of their newest planters, which is called the Easy Cube. And I will tell you, after putting it together, as well as learning about all the features, I think the name is pretty appropriate. This beauty is self-watering, so you fill the reservoir and your plants will water themselves. It's also beginner friendly with super simple setup, just a few screws and one connecting tube, as you can see here, if you're doing the double size like we have. It's beginner friendly. It's low maintenance because you spend next to no time weeding or watering with the bed this tall, and it's super versatile. You can add a pop of green to any space from your patio to your living room because it has a leak-free design, which is perfect for indoors or out. So this is a no mess, no stress way of gardening. So whether you're a senior who has trouble bending over or somebody new just looking to get started in the gardening world, this is the perfect way to get set up. If you are interested in an Easy Cube, make sure to check the link in the description. I have a discount that is a limited time only, but will offer you extra money off of this beauty. So definitely make sure to check it out. And thank you again to our friends at Vago for sponsoring today's video. If you are curious about me possibly doing a giveaway on a bed like this, make sure to drop a line in the comments down below and let me know that's something you're interested in because it is something I'm considering. So once again, thanks to Vago for sponsoring today's content, and let's jump back into the process. Now you saw that when I brought the redbuds in, all I did was take my tea kettle, heat up some water, and go ahead and pour it on top. That has to sit for 24 hours. The reason is those blossoms are really, really resistant to letting go of all their gorgeous color and flavor. So the longer that sets, the better. You can do it as short as 12 hours, but what I've found after some research was that 24 is way better. So we put this in around noon on that day, and it was really easy to just process it after noon the following day. But in the meantime, I have had some blackberries hanging out in my freezer for more time than I would like to admit. I packaged them up in 2-cup portions in an effort to have them ready to make a blackberry pie. But the truth is, I don't make much pie. I'm not a super sweet person, which, say what you will, some people find that a little bit funny. So I decided to go ahead and make some blackberry jelly with it because my kids love jelly. Since most of what's out there is super high in sugar or kind of low in flavor as a result of leaving it out, I decided to try our own. What I'm using here is Pomona's pectin, and I find that it allows me to use less sugar or even honey in an effort to reduce the sugar but still keep the flavor. Because we had tried a honey recipe previously and we're super happy with the way it came out, I did decide to go ahead and use sugar on this, but I used half the amount of sugar that a traditional jelly recipe calls for. And what we found as a result is it brought out the amazing flavor of the blackberries without overpowering it with a taste of sugar. Traditional jellies will call for equal amounts juice to sugar. So like if you're using 4 cups of juice, you'd use 4 cups of sugar. This one is allowing me to use 2 cups, which is a huge reduction, also allowing those bright flavors to come on through. Now, another cool thing about the Pomonas is it allows for a lot of variation. If you wanted to go with as little as a 1/2 cup of sugar, you could definitely do that, or even 1/4 on this specific recipe. But there is an insert inside the box of Pomona's pectin that will give you all of the details on what to do for anything that you're doing, from a jam to a jelly with all different types of juices. I know that some of the traditional pectins have started to leave that out and make it an online option, but I find, as well as my mother-in-law, who I was just talking about this with the other day, that having that paper right in the box makes it so much easier to just rely back to all the time. That's kind of something that we're a fan of. So Pomona still does allow that, which I think is really great. Now you add the pectin to the sugar and mix it thoroughly. You'll see what happens if you don't get that done later. But for now, you mix it thoroughly. Once everything comes to a rolling boil, go ahead and just get it all blended up. Stir for about a minute or 2. You don't want to overcook this at all. That can come to breaking of the jelly itself. So once it gets back to rolling boil and everything is stirred, go ahead and turn off that heat and then go ahead and get it jarred up. Now, jellies themselves require a 1/4 inch of headspace. And since you are using something with sugar that is sticky and sweet, making sure to get those rims super clean is very, very important. For me, the best way to get that done is to go ahead and use white vinegar to wipe the rims. This ensures that there's no sticky mess left behind and is a great help in making sure that all of those lids do get sealed. The last thing you want to do is go to all of this effort and take your beautiful fruit and end up having it not taken care of properly and sealed in the canner. So definitely make sure to take the time to do that. So once lids and rings are on, into the water bath. This is going to bring me to my one complaint that I have about this digital canner. The time only adjusts in 5-minute increments. That's not a problem in 99.9% of recipes that you're ever going to make. But if you are using Pomona's, it says to adjust based on altitude 1 minute at a time, and to make sure not to go over, because you don't want to break the jelly and you don't want to break the consistency that you're looking for. So as a result, I needed 12 minutes. I went ahead and turned it up to 15, set my own timer, and then just turned it off when I hit the proper time. That might be more than some of you want to do. I would recommend doing it on the stove if that's the case. Any pot or pan will do. You just want to make sure that you have enough to cover it with 1 inch or 2 of water. Now, we're back to the next day, Redbud jelly, and as you can see, this one takes a whole lot of pectin. I used the violet jelly recipe from Pomona's. That one I did have to find online, and it takes a little bit more pectin than some of the other berry or different types of jellies and jams that you can make. I did go ahead and stir it up what I thought was pretty well there, but actually upon looking back and kind of reviewing the footage, what was happening was the pectin was all falling to the bottom of the sugar. My sugar is a raw sugar, so it's a lot larger than if you were to just run to the store and buy some sugar. And as a result, the majority of that pectin got to the bottom, didn't really get mixed in well, and you'll see what happens here in the end. The next step after mixing up your pectin and sugar is to go ahead and measure out your juice. Now, I did strain off those flower blossoms just to make sure that I had everything clean, nothing else extra going in the jar, and then went ahead and measured out 4 cups. Once you have the correct amount measured out, take it over to the stove and get it warmed up. You also have to add lemon juice here. Of course, lemon juice is what keeps it shelf stable and the proper acidity. So you do want to make sure to use a bottled lemon juice when you do that. Now I'm adding the calcium water here as we're heating it up. That is part of the pomonas, which actually helps the gel to set and come together. Once you reach the right consistency, again, you're going to go ahead and add that sugar as well as the pectin. And when I do, you will see that it starts to foam up a lot. A lot of that pectin is going to come to the top, and it did not mix in as easily as I had hoped it would. I had also cut back the pectin just slightly because with pomonas, you can adjust the amount of pectin that you're using based off of how strong or how hard you want the jelly to actually set. In the past, we did one that was a little harder, so I decided to make this one a tad bit softer. And as you can see, we have a lot of floating pectin here. We didn't get it all mixed in. As it was coming back to a boil, I just went ahead and did a lot of scraping against the side in an effort to kind of squish it all in there and get it mixed up. Now, keep in mind, this was a huge amount of pectin, a huge amount of sugar. So all in, I'm still going to end up with a jelly that sets. I just went ahead and took off some of the film that was on the top before I put it into the jars. No problems, it's still gelled. So in case you're wondering, if you get to this point and think you've wasted all this time, 24 hours waiting on your Redbud tea and all the things, just go ahead and fill the jars. It will be fine. It is still safe. You have everything mixed in. It might just impact the texture of your final product a little bit. What's the worst case that's going to happen? Well, you're going to end up with a Redbud syrup instead of a Redbud jelly. Still both useful and very similar applications. So for us, that wouldn't be a problem either way you went. Now, many of you might be wondering what Redbud jelly actually tastes like, and I am here to tell you it tastes like the most delicious combination of grape and cherry that you are ever going to come across. I actually have a friend that refers to it as cotton candy in a jar, and I have to tell you, I think she's onto something. So if you are curious or have ever been curious about Redbud jelly, I say go for it. There are many recipes that you can find online, but I will make sure to go ahead and link this one down in the comments for those who might be interested in checking it out. So while I got to start on my spring canning, I am always looking for more things to try. If you have any spring favorites, make sure to drop them down in the comments below. I love it when my comments turn into a source of information and inspiration for everyone who comes to look. I'd also appreciate if you are interested in me doing a giveaway for that Vago Easy Cube. Make sure to add that to the comments, because if there is enough interest, I will make sure to make that happen. But for now, I want to thank you for stopping by. I hope you come back next week to see our favorite spring meals. And for now, friends, I'll see you back soon.